Welcome to another episode of Sabbaticals Live, where we're bringing you weekly interviews with uh, industry experts and accomplished cruisers. And this week we've got Ben Kelly from North Sails joining us. Ben's had a lifetime of sail making and experience with performance racing of multi-hulls and boats from Trilogy, such as the racing trimaran through to the extreme 40s. So bring you up there, Ben, and unmute you. G'day, Ben. How are you, mate?
Hello to all. Good morning in Australia and wherever you come from. Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for joining us this morning. A really interesting topic that we're going to dive into here, and that's around sail design, sail technology, as it applies to cruising multi-hulls, and maybe coming from a performance background, considering your history, Ben. But before we get into it, mate, how are you going? Where are you? What's your situation at the moment through all this COVID stuff?
Well, hopefully you won't hear too much background noise, but I'm in the loft at the moment and we're actually firing. We're quite busy. We're lucky enough to be in a very lucky country in Australia. The east coast of Australia is a great cruising ground. And we have lots of people planning at the moment to get north, to get out on their boats and making preparations for the easing of restrictions. So it's business as normal as it can be at the moment.
I'm very envious. The opening of restrictions to go cruising and travelling around Queensland, I think it's got the rest of Australia sort of feeling a little bit teased at the moment. So all the Queenslanders in Southeast Queensland there ready to go to the Whitsundays. Congratulations. Hope to be up there soon ourselves. But yeah, good to hear that you're busy, and certainly things seem to be getting busy on our end as well, which is great. So maybe before we get into the subject, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, what was your first boat? What did you learn to sail on?
Well, I grew up sailing with my father and family as sailors. So I was lucky enough to grow up in that environment. And Dad sailed beach cats competitively and also raced for the Air Force in Hobie cats. So straight away, when I was a kid, I was having fun on boats, and beach cats were a big part of it, right the way through trailer sailors as well when I was in my early teens. But my first boat was a Sabo. Grew up competitively sailing Sabos with my brother and have a lot of great friends from those years, and learnt the basics of sailboat handling and racing in Sabos, and went right through skiffs and beach cats. And I think my first cat was a Type N 4.9, which is still one of my favourite boats ever.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And later on in life, you get into some of the bigger boats. I think I've got a slide here on the extreme 40s. You got involved in those a little bit?
Yeah, the extreme 40s, I think I first got involved with the Boatworks boat, which is in the picture there, in 2016. And I've been lucky enough to do all sorts of events, Hamilton Island and Airlie Beach and Multihull Nationals and state titles. And they've been a great boat. I've been involved with all 4 boats that are in the country at the moment. And there's a little bit of changing of ownership going on and some boats for sale, but they are a really high performance, beautiful boat, and kind of come from the last of the era before foiling kicked in. And whilst we all love watching foiling, as we get older and we all want to sail fast boats, this kind of is like a boat that's on the rev limiter of traditional multi-hull sailing before you step up to full pro cruise and shore teams. So, mate, I've had an absolute thrill on these boats, and they're pretty quick. So
yeah. Do you think the class will go on and develop, or
I really hope so. It's a good platform for people to experience this level of sailing, a reasonably low cost entry and a high end boat. So the boats are here. We know of more around the world available. So, if people want to get involved, get in touch. But it's a really good thing to have happening in this country.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to go syndicate shares on a Extreme 40, get in touch with me. But anyway,
one in the pictures for sale, yeah. So
we'll move on, mate. I wanted to, I guess, dive into sail design and sail choices and so on. But before we get there, a lot of people move into cruising multi-hulls from a monohull background, and there are some differences between sail cut and sail design. What are the key points of difference, do you think?
So the main point that's different, and why a lot of people convince their wives that they love the platform that is a multi-hull, is the boat is not going to heel when the load comes on. It has a high riding moment. So what that means is the pressure of the wind goes into your sails, your rigging, your bowsprit, your beams, every part of the boat, and the boat has to cope with higher loads than a monohull. A monohull is more forgiving on all those aspects because it heels over and alleviates the load. But basically, as soon as you go to any multi-hull, doesn't matter fast or slow, you've got a very stable platform, and that's going to transfer loads to all those items. And in terms of the sails, that means higher engineering specifications, and everything needs to be taken into account. And you're also going to see different sails and less sails generally on a multi-hull.
And so what about the sail cut? I mean, you obviously see square tops on multi-hulls a lot more than you do on monohulls. Why is that?
When it comes to the multi-hull, you need horsepower to get the boat moving. You got a nice stable platform that's not going to heel over, so it can handle horsepower. And up the east coast of Australia, you do a lot of reaching and downwind sailing, and that's where the square top sail gets horsepower in the boat, but it's also quite forgiving in terms of the sail twisting and alleviating that load or giving more gust response. So in gusty conditions, the sail will actually spill the air and alleviate the load on the boat.
So it's giving a greater sail area in the lighter patches,
yes.
But as the gusts hit, it twists and the top out.
Is relatively automatic, yeah. And we don't have vangs, so the boom is able to lift when it's not sheeted on high, and you get this movement in the top of the sail that becomes your shock absorber, because the boat isn't the shock absorber. So we're trying to give the boat the ability to alleviate the load out of the sail and then accelerate forward, rather than loading everything up, straining all those items like the rigging and the sails and the platform itself. And square heads have come from a performance racing angle when you're trying to get more horsepower into boats, without going a taller rig, but it's actually become a means of helping cruising sailors get more horsepower in their boat in light winds, particularly reaching and downwind, not so much to windward. And then there's the benefit of more gust response and spilling of the load.
Excellent description. So while we're talking about sail choices, and we'll go to firstly sails off the wind and how they differ in options here. I'll share one of your slides. You've got a great article on your website there about different sail choices. These have all got different names and somehow translate from one sail maker to another, sometimes with different names. But give us the rundown here on the key, I guess, points of difference and points of use here.
Yeah, it's a great slide. You can see, I like to explain it as a sliding scale. And ultimately on the left, we have a triangle, which we all know as a genoa or jib. And eventually on the right, we have a nice plump, round, deep G2 running Jenica or running asymmetric spinnaker. And multi-hulls have a lot of sail options between those two. And, we tend to look at the mid-girth of the sail, which is how wide the sail is halfway up relative to the foot. So if you look at a genoa on the left, the mid-girth is half the width of the foot. If we move all the way across to a G2 or running asymmetric, the mid-girth may be the same width as the foot. So as you come away from the wind, as the apparent wind moves aft, as you're reaching, your sails start to get broader in their girth and deeper in their shape. And G0s and code zeros are those great new reaching developments that multi-hulls really love and can have a wide range of use for. G1 is like a performance multi-hull asymmetric, and a G2 is your classic deep running spinnaker, running kite.
So is a G1 something you'd potentially furl up?
A G1 is a top-down furling option, as is a G2. It's really when you're moving from the code sails to what we know as a traditional soft fluff asymmetric spinnaker. So G1, G2 are top-down furling sails or your traditional spinnaker sock.
Yeah.
And you would find a G1 normally on your more performance-orientated catamarans.
Yeah. Yeah, we see some of those on some of the ultramars and certainly a big range of sails that we will go through. In fact, this slide here, I think, is a really interesting, I guess, demonstration of the different sails and different wind speeds and angles. You've even got reefs put in here too.
Yeah, I love this slide. This is something I developed for a client with a 50-foot cruising cat. And every owner can think of their whole sail wardrobe and sailing angles and wind range in a graph like this. It could be adapted to any boat. You know, up the left, you've got the actual true wind speed. Down the bottom, heading off to the right, you've got the true wind angle. So if you started, you know, I've got the full main in there on this boat, went up to about 18 knots, and then we put the first reef in and it got through to 25 and so on up until we dropped the main in over 35 knots. The multi-hull normally has just one jib. Some boats you'll find with staysails or heavy weather jibs if they're ocean going or crossing boats, but the basic package is either a jib on a self-tacker or a Genoa overlapper. And, you know, it's really headed down the road with modern design where most boats have the rig back a bit further aft and a self-tacking jib. And then it's really good to also have a storm jib. But if you look at the bubbles as each individual sail, you can see that your jib or your Genoa has a huge range of use. You know, some people don't use spinnakers or G0s at all and use that jib through the entire wind range, but it becomes quite ineffective in lighter airs and running deeper angles. So basically you can grab a true wind speed and a heading that you want to sail, and the sail can be customized and developed to fill that slot. And when you look at a boat and you analyze what they have, this is the type of graph that's a really good way to you know, visualize what your sails can achieve and where they've been designed to be used.
That's a great great display. I'm actually going to borrow a slide here from last week's presentation we did with a Ultramar 4X owner, and this was a sail package that I think North's optioned up for him, or various choices depending on obviously different reefs and different Genoas and storm sails to balance it out.
Yeah, so the balance is the ultimate word. You know, we learn when we're sailing dinghies pretty early on that have a main and jib that the boat is so affected by either sail in rounding up or bearing away and balancing out the helm. And a big cat offshore, you really need to balance your sails forward of the mast and your mainsail. And this is a good one to show that if you're getting rid of mainsail area in terms of reef, you either have a reefable Genoa or a smaller staysail or a storm jib with a third reef is ultimately going to balance out the boat.
So Ben, I mean, if you've got, you know, I've got a lot of customers that will be setting themselves up to, you know, go cruising up the East Coast and then do some passage making with boats that can get up and sail a bit rather than, you know, purely be sitting in the lower speed. So what are the go-to sails that you tend to recommend for a cruising cat that's got a little bit of performance?
Yeah, so it can, all the names of them can get very confusing, and yes, they change a little from brand to brand, but you know, in Australia, we always throw the phrase screecher around. Yeah. And it's essentially a reaching bigger Genoa, but that has evolved and we've had to come up with other names. And you know, the classic sail to put on almost any multi-hull, regardless of speed, is a G0. It's like a cruising code 0. And it's sort of somewhere halfway roughly between an asymmetric spinnaker and a Genoa.
Right. So the code zero, was it?
Yeah, code zero, G0 is what we call
G0.
the cruising sail. And it can start off relatively triangular in nature and flatter and smaller. And it depends where the boat's sailing and the breeze they're sailing in and if they're short-handed. And it can end up nearing the look of that G1 in that photo. So it covers a really broad range of designs, and that's something that's heavily customized to each customer's needs. But a G0 or code zero is a really great sail for, say, the east coast of Australia. It can be sheeted in quite hard and sail at true wind angles, 70 degrees in lighter airs, and then eased out and actually be used quite deep downwind in, say, 15 to 20 knots. And the fact that it has a tight luff means that it can be top down or bottom up furling, and that makes it really user friendly, especially for short-handed couples.
And when you say a tight luff, you just want to explain what that means?
Yeah, well, if you imagine a Genoa or a headsail by nature has a tight luff because it's attached to a forestay. With a G0 or code zero, we're replicating that style of sail with a tight luff with a torque cable inside the luff of the sail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essentially like a soft forestay. So the sail, those styles of sails will always have a tight luff and furl around a cable.
Yeah, so you can still furl it up, but you can drop it and pack it away.
Yeah, and there's a whole range of issues, but that sail can be made in heavier weights, quite flat and quite triangular with a UV strip and be kept up, although we don't recommend that. Or it can be made quite light and quite deep, still with a tight luff, and be eased out and achieve pretty deep sailing angles. So, you know, I've sold cruising couples G0s in reasonably light fabrics. That is their only downwind sail option. And some people don't even raise their main. You know, if they're in 10 knots and they're going 100 miles up the coast to another anchorage, they can achieve a fair bit with an easy to handle G0.
Right.
In a lighter cloth.
So that brings up a good question then. So what about sail cloth choice, particularly on these? I mean, are you dealing with a heavier cloth or a lighter spinnaker cloth?
That's a great picture to talk about cloth. If you look at the three central slides and say we could almost call any of them a G0 on a lower performance cruising catamaran or trimaran.
Yeah.
On the left, as you're getting closer to the shape of a traditional Genoa, the fabrics need to be heavier. It's more likely it's going to be a laminated cloth to resist stretch and cope with the loads and sail closer to the wind. And as you come away from the wind and the sail gets naturally deeper and plumper, you can then afford to build the sail out of lighter cloths that float easier and you know, set in light winds and sail deeper angles. So, you know, you have to design a sail that gives you the broadest possible range, and you have to identify if it's more needed to sail closer to the wind or deeper to the wind. If you said, I don't want an asymmetric, I've had a scare in the past, I had a problem, I need an easy to use sail, you could do a G0 in a bottom up furling or top down furling in quite a light 1.5 to 2.5 ounce spinnaker fabric and almost get spinnaker performance with that ability to just furl a line, get rid of the sail and drop it. But a light sail in woven fabrics like that, you wouldn't have a UV strip on. Right. So there's a real sliding scale and you need to think about it a little bit like the pictures we got in front of us. It's yeah, if it's performing more like a headsail and closer to the wind, then the fabrics are going to be heavier. If it's lighter and deeper, we can afford to put lighter cloth and get you downwind performance. So, you know, this sail is highly customizable and is designed to people's needs and wants.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a quick question here from John. Thanks, John. How does a code 0 cope with furling it when the wind gets up? East Coast often sees 20 to 25 knots.
Yeah, like always, you want to plan ahead and you want to know if you got a storm front coming and it'd be best to furl a code 0 when you're at 15 to 18 knots before the squall comes through. But these kind of tight luff sails are the easiest sails to furl. So if you're going to have something up and you want the ease of use and you're in a tricky situation, these sorts of sails are going to furl best. Bottom up furling is going to be the fastest means of furling that sail with the least turns of the furling line. And a G0 or a code 0 is actually quite an easy sail in that tricky situation to furl. There's a few things that we add in that make it easier. You need a really good quality torque cable. Cutting corners in that department make that moment all the more difficult. We add Velcros to the clues. So when you do finally get it furled away, the Velcro grabs on itself and adds more furling security, so it's not going to shake out. So we're doing things to try to make the sails as user-friendly and as safe as possible, and it just keeps evolving.
Yeah, that's actually a great little innovation, because I've had to pack away a few screeches in the middle of the night that have been left up.
Yeah.
It's not much fun. In fact, actually, just John's added here, can they be partially furled? Well, they can't really be partially furled around a taut line or a...
No, really, when you leave a Genoa that's on your furler on the forestay and you go to any of these other sails, they cannot be partly furled.
But the Genoa can, though, right?
The Genoa can, yeah. The Genoa definitely can be engineered. It costs extra and there's extra reinforcement that has to go in the sail, but we do recommend that, particularly for short-handed couples, to give you more range out of that sail.
Yeah. And okay, so code 0, that sounds like a good one. What else? I mean, obviously you've got a main and probably a jib of some description.
Yeah, well, basically a G0 is the go-to. It's going to cover the most angles and be the easiest to use. But if you have a reasonable amount of experience and you're going to be sailing in reasonably light winds, the boat's really only going to get the best downwind performance from an asymmetric spinnaker. Mm-hmm. They are more complicated to use. Some people have had difficult situations, like you say, when the wind comes in, because they're more complicated to use, but ultimately they're the most efficient sail to get you deep downwind. So when you can have a G0 to cover that mid-range when your headstall's no longer effective, but then a G1 or a G2 running asymmetric is ultimately the best option to get you deep downwind.
Yeah, G2 is something we see on a lot of cruising cats, or the equivalent of. We have had a few owners move to a symmetrical kite just to drop everything and run deep. Do you see many of those on cruising cats?
Yeah, look, I've done quite a few over the years, but they're definitely not as popular. The sail designs of the running asymmetrics are quite advanced now, and we talk about tweaking the sail. When you ease it right out, you actually see the luff come around to windward, and you can tweak the clue. So the sheet is basically deflected a little bit further forward, often around where the side stay base is, or a horn cleat. And you can morph that sail into a sail that's almost going to be asymmetrical when it's eased right out. So, just through advancements in sail design, we're basically getting the asymmetrics to run so deep that most people with a good design are able to cut the symmetrical out of the equation.
And that's the benefit, isn't it? Because you got a symmetrical, you can run shyer angles if you need to.
Yeah.
But still quite deep.
Yeah, ultimately you've got to stow all these sails. You don't want to overcomplicate it, particularly if you're sailing with a partner that doesn't have a lot of sailing knowledge or skills. So, my advice would be some form of reaching sail that starts off, it could be a screech or a G0. It may be a code 0. And then ultimately a deep running asymmetric spinnaker that we would call a G2 will cover the whole range.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, when you do a multi-hull asymmetric, it is built to cope with higher loads. The apparent does come forward. The multi-hull sail in nature is a strong sail. So there's almost no such thing as a super lightweight cruising multi-hull sail. They're all engineered to cope with that occasional increase in load that the boat's going to put on, and that's one of the biggest differences in a good multi-hull sail, is its ability to cope with what the boat's going to subject it to.
So, I mean, is there such thing as having too many sails? I mean, why wouldn't you just, cost aside, load up with every sail?
Yeah, and when we're talking to cruisers, that's one of the biggest drivers is where do I stow them all? How do I stow them? How do I get the minimum amount of sails to cover that range of sailing angles and breezes? So you definitely can have too many sails, and we work very hard to tailor the design and work with that graph so that the actual whole set of sails is working together and covering that range. And it's not about like racing land where we try and have a sail to cover every angle. We try to have really usable sails. So 2 downwind sails, 2 upwind sails possibly, and a storm jib is all you really need.
And it's a good point around the fact that the cruising sails are a bit, I guess, over-engineered and therefore heavier, right? Because certainly once you get up on, a 50 or 60 foot cat, those sails can get quite bulky and heavy to move around.
Yeah, anyone who's taken a fully battened 50-foot cat main off knows they're working pretty hard, and there has been huge advancements in fabric and hardware, and it is getting easier and better. But if someone is getting sails to cross oceans or go around the world for a 50-foot multi-hull, they need to be engineered for that, and they are heavy, indestructible sails, no doubt about it.
So let's talk a little bit more about, well, firstly, you mentioned storm sails. So what are your options as far as storm sails go? If you're out in the real wild blow, what would you be recommending to put up?
So the first thing for anyone who's anticipating sailing in an area that could see 40 plus knots, which is the east coast of Australia with a summer storm, you need to have a deep reef in your main, and we'd almost consider that part of the storm sail equation, because really short-handed couples aren't getting trysails and attaching them up to the boom and getting on top of the cabin in extreme conditions. So the traditional storm trysail really doesn't come into the equation. We want a deep reef main, and the next stage is to drop the entire main. So we're talking reefs that are more than 50% reduction in luff length. And because of the way the sail tapers, it's quite a big reduction in sail area compared to the full main. So that's your first back end storm setup. It really makes sense to also have a storm jib that is high vis in color and is on a system that is as easy as possible to deploy, is handy and stowed away. And quite often that would be tacked to a position, a bit like a staysail position, a third of the way back from the forestay to the mast, for instance, and may have its own halyard or cable that it hangs onto, or even a torque cable in the sail. But that's a pretty specific sail that lots of people get around without, but I would encourage people to when they can, get a rigger involved, look at what the boat can accept, talk to a sailmaker, and get yourself set up with a proper storm jibbing system that works, just from a safety point of view. And you may never use it. That's the hard part about it.
So if you don't have the option to put on a inner stay for a staysail or storm jib like that, what's another solution or workaround for a storm jib?
So the first thing is, if you have a genoa or a jib, you could look at having partial furling reinforcement built into the sail. The problem with that approach is that sail's still ultimately going to be too big. So you're going to need to look at a storm jib, and storm jibs can be made to wrap and attach around a furled headsail. It's another option.
Yeah.
So I think in that case, I think in that instance, that's probably where you'd have to go. If you engineer a genoa to be strong enough to partially furl and sail in 40 to 50 knots, the problem then is that it's not a good genoa in 0 to 10. So you're asking too much of that one sail. So I would encourage people, if you were going to set off out of Sydney Heads and head down to Hobart for the Food and Wine Festival, you should be looking at getting a really good storm jib setup that's easy to use, and there'll be a rigger and a sailmaker involved in that.
Yeah, and I have seen storm jibs where they essentially envelope over the top of the a furled jib or genoa. So that there are workarounds, isn't there?
Yeah, there is workarounds. It's not what I believe is the best recommended go-to,
Right.
but it may be where you end up. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so apart from sail type, we touched a little bit on sail cloth options, and actually there's a good diagram there around the girth there that you mentioned before.
Yeah.
But here's an image of a Seawinds 1260, very standard set of sails, Dacron sails, and then we'll touch a little bit on the more exotic products such as the 3DI cloths. And there's a whole range of stuff in between. So just want to give a little summary, I guess, on the pros and cons from Dacron and the major choices in between.
Yeah, so Dacron always has its place. It's been around for a long time. It comes in a huge range of forms, and that's probably the biggest message that's hard to get across is almost all Dacron looks like this photo, and you can't really tell the difference even holding it in your hand. But you might have a Dacron that wholesales at $9 a metre, and you might have one that's $40 a metre, and that creates a very different price point for the sale. So within that white basic looking Dacron range, there is a huge range of options, and you need to get into what your sale's being built out of if you're getting a Dacron sale. Now, Dacron has huge advantages in longevity. It is fantastic for humid environments. It's woven by nature, so it's not going to delaminate and fall apart. It's fine to have moisture on it. So it's a traditional sailcloth that's not going to go away, and it creates the lowest price point and is durable and long lasting. The issue with multi-hulls and the higher loads that we spoke about earlier is these loads get transferred onto the cloth, and the Dacron, even though it may last 10 to 15 years, ultimately is stretching out of shape from the day it goes on the boat, and we're losing a lot of efficiency, and we're loading up our hardware more and our slides. And, a lot of cruisers say, I don't care about performance, but it's still pretty good to get to the next anchorage ahead of your mates or get there and have a sundowner. And I think when it comes down to it, performance does matter. So,
well, if you're on a sailing boat and you're sailing, it always matters, doesn't it?
It's always a race,
in some respect.
Yeah.
But it's a really good point. So we see a lot of Dacron sales, and as we sell the secondhand boats, you'll see, I guess, scallops and blowing out pockets in the luff where it stretches over time.
Yeah.
But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have I think this is a set of 3DIs on a Ultranet 5X. So when you
there's a mid-range as well. There's a mid-range where we move into laminated tri-radial sails that are often.
Why don't you explain a little bit about that, because that's probably the most common that we see on cruising boats.
Yeah, the most obvious go-to once you're moving away from Dacron, and you really need to move away from Dacron once you're over about 45 feet. The loads are just too high, is what's known in the industry as a cruise laminate. And it comes in many different forms, but we're basically talking about polyester or aramid fibers encapsulated within taffetas externally. So it is all glued together, and it's tri-radial in cut, and it's quite durable, and it resists the stretch and the loading the multi-hull puts on it. So it's the obvious go-to step up from Dacron. The problem is that ultimately a tri-radial cruise laminate sail out of almost any cloth available has a shorter lifespan and is more susceptible to breakdown and delamination, especially in humid environments. So it's a great go-to for a multi-hull to get your sail shape to hold together for a lot longer and keep the performance in your boat, but it does have a shorter lifespan in terms of how long it physically holds together. But at least while you have that sail, it's hard to put lifespans on sails because they all get used in different ways. But if you have a cruise laminate sail that you may get 8 years out of, the shape will be relatively good through the whole sail's life, and it's a lot lighter sail than a Dacron sail. So when it comes to getting it off and getting it serviced or whatever you need to do with it, it's a lot lighter sail. So there's a step forward there. So there's real positives and negatives when you're looking between a Dacron and a cruise laminate. It's more expensive than Dacron, and it lasts for less, has a shorter lifespan. So what we move on to then is membrane sails, and I'll only talk about the North option, but there's been big developments in the racing, yacht and multi-hull world, and the French are absolutely the leaders and the people who prove this globally. But there's been a big change in North sails to filament rather than fibre, and there's a new process called 3DI, and it's come off the back of Volvo ocean race boats and big round-the-world multi-hulls, and it's the monolithic sail structure built out of filaments rather than fibre bundles, and it's an absolute monolithic one-piece sail rather than a sandwich, and that's the single biggest change that we've seen in sail making. And the two big steps forward are durability, lack of delamination, and the sheer weight of the sail has come down massively. So a sail like on Excalibur here, the main sail, that may be a 60 kilo sail in 3DI, and it's probably 100 kilos in Dacron. And that feels quite different when you put it on your shoulder and carried it off. And it sets quite differently when you're sailing in 5 to 10 knots. So, and it's all weight aloft that's loading your rigging and everything like that.
So how do they make those sails, Ben? I mean, when you talk about filaments rather than fibers, how are the sails actually made? I mean, we can all sort of picture sailcloth, laying out in a loft when you're making a standard set of sails. How are these sails made?
Yeah, well, the fiber starts life on a little spool, and it actually gets split into filaments. So one fiber may be 25 filaments, and then it basically is made into tapes that are a couple of 100 mil wide and pre-impregnated. And it's really going down a road that's a lot more comparable to boat building. Pre-preg carbon at the highest end is a woven carbon fiber that already has the glue in and is put into molds and then ultimately heat set and cooked. Well, 3DI is a pre-impregnated filament tape that is laid by a machine flat onto the floor, and all the filaments are laid with the load lines, and there's quite a lot of layers. There may be 30 layers of these filament tapes that go into the sail. And then that big chunk of sail that's got filaments going in all different directions and it's already got its glue in it is taken to a 3D mold and placed over a 3D mold, and it conforms to the mold. And through vacuum bagging and then heat setting or heat activation of the glue, all those little filaments, just like when you make a boat, are basically becoming one. And that's the biggest step, is we're no longer getting a taffeta, putting fibers in between, glue and another taffeta. We're now doing it with 20 to 30 layers of small filaments that, when they're heat activated, is becoming like one monolithic structure. It's like if you made a carbon fiber plate, you're not going to be able to turn that back into all the layers that go into it. So it's like a soft version of a carbon or glass plate. And then the big step that's evolved is the way that 3DI has proved itself in longevity, getting huge lifespans in sails in the Volvo Ocean Race over the earlier technology 3DL. And by using lower budget fibers, polyesters like used in Dacron and Aramid and Spectra, they've made the technology really work and be suitable and appropriate for cruising boats. First, it would have gone into the super yachts, and it was well proven there. And then Multihulls are a really good platform for 3DI molded sails. And North has a range of fiber options that can make the bottom option, the ocean, in a polyester finish, reasonably affordable for something that's so light, performance orientated still, and has a really long lifespan. And the beauty of this technology that I really love is I'm selling someone something they can put in a jet black boom bag, like that picture over your shoulder. They can take it to any corner of the world, the humid, get it rained on, have it wet in the bag, and it's not affected the way laminated sailcloth traditionally was. It's not delaminating or breaking down because of its environment. And that's a massive step forward for cruisers.
So you're saving weight, you're getting a lighter, more durable sail that doesn't stretch, but it's expensive. There's got to be some catch.
It's a drawn out process. There's a lot of labor.
Yeah.
You know, I've just been over to the States before the corona thing that's going on in February, and I got to go to Minden to the factory where they have these 3D molds. And, you know, it wasn't just all black racing sails. There is a huge market take up of this technology, and it's really almost perfect for cruisers, you know. And the big thing is the lighter weight sail and a low stretch sail. But what I really love about it is how it handles the harsh environments. And, you know, firsthand down here in Australia and up into Asia, we have a really harsh environment for sails that are glued together and ultimately can delaminate. So to have something that you can trust and know that it's a one-piece monolithic structure is huge.
And just out of interest, talked about the factory in the States and the molds. I mean, how are they actually making the molds? Because they must be custom tweaked for each sail.
Yeah, they're fully changeable, and first they have all the hydraulics underneath that are able to computer control the shape, and then over top of that they have almost like fiberglass rod battens, and at every 50 mil intervals running in, you know, both directions. And as the hydraulics change, that whole surface can change with it, and it's quite incredible. But it's a fully changeable 3D mold that's customized to every sail.
Wow.
And I think they can do sails on that mold. Well, they've got heaps of molds, but up to about 90 meters long.
Wow.
You know, and I've done sails on Corsair Sprints that come off the molds as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Excellent. So, and actually mentioned, I'll just go back to this image here. You talked about radial cuts, and I guess I think this is a radial cut Genoa here, or it looks like a code.
See how it's out on the bowsprit? We're going to call that a G0.
Yeah, code 0.
It's got a UV strip on it, and traditionally in Australia we would call it a screecher. But that sail is made in a tri-radial laminate. It's the most common type of downwind sail we sell, and that sail can be done in 3DI as well.
So this is where you've got panels of sailcloth all pointing towards the center of effort, and you've got seams where they're glued and stitched. Yeah.
So that fabric starts life on a roll that's about 1.5 meters wide, and then the sail is designed, and it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. And you know, the fibers running along the roll, and we put those panels along the roll, and we're basically trying to stop the stretch out of the three corners by running the sail fabric with the load lines in the sail.
So that's a very common option on cruising cats at the moment. But it sounds like there's a lot of technology and big advantages. So, you know, over time maybe we'll see more of this 3DI come through.
I can guarantee it's exciting the way it's heading, and I think the good part about it for the cruising clients is it is value for money in the long run. Like we've really got increased longevity, and by bringing this, you know, durable racing technology down into cruising and adapting it and getting lower cost options, the price has been coming down for cruisers, and more products have been coming out. So the Ocean line of 3DI is an incredibly durable product that suits almost any cruising multi.
Exciting stuff. Why don't we move on to, I guess, setting up sails for more short-handed sailing, which a lot of our customers do, either whether they're, you know, solo sailing or as a couple. And we've got a couple of different diagrams here, one of which I just bring up now. you want to give us an explanation of what we're looking at here? So I think on a gunboat, yeah?
Yeah, it's a gunboat. This is a G0 in a laminate, a little bit like the sail we looked at on the Outremer before, but this is a lightweight sail without a UV strip. This sail has a tweaker. That's what I was talking about. See the block that the sheet's deflecting through and going down to the side stay base. That is a really appropriate piece of hardware to use on any boat. It comes from racing, but a short-handed crew can use a tweaker like that to change the shape of the sail and change the twist and ultimately have the most stable sail for the angle you want to sail. So with that tweaker in that photo, as you ease the sail and you run deeper, you pull the tweaker down harder, and you need to think about it a little bit like a Genoa track. You're actually sliding the track forward and stopping the top of the sail from spilling so much. And the bottom of the sail gets deeper, and you can actually morph the shape of the sail. So
that's a really cool little addition there. So that's just a like a spectral line or something attached to the chain plate there.
Yeah, I would say that there's a fairly hefty block or even a friction ring on the base of that stay, and it would deflect through that and lead back to a winch, and that would be a snatch block on the sheet. Now, if you've got enough winches and enough room, that's a great way to do it. It could be a 6-to-1 handy billy or purchase system that has a cleat on it that you use to do that. In its simplest form, once you work it all out, that could be a rope with a carabiner on it that's 1.5 meters long, and you clip it on before you run deeper, and it changes the shape of the sail for your running setting. It really has come out of racing, but I would encourage people to look at that photo and try and think about how you can change the shape of your sail by using a tweaker on the sheet. It really does, it really does allow a sail to have another 15 degrees of use. And ultimately, if you're sailing along on an auto helm, it's going to make a more stable sail as well. And that's safe, and it means less trimming. It's going to prolong the life of the sail as well.
And when it comes to spinnakers, I think we've got a video diagram here of us running a sock arrangement. Drop that audio down. I'm going to explain how the sock on a spinnaker.
Yeah, so the spinnaker sleeve or sock or snuffer is another word that's used. I still support them. I think they're a great, simple way of a short-handed crew deploying or retrieving an asymmetric spinnaker. So it's for a soft set sail, like we have the video here. The sail's designed to have a little more room up the top on the hoist, so the sock can live up there when you're sailing. And this sock is pulled down externally over the whole entire sail and basically gets the air out of the sail. You make it look really easy there. And I think it's a good, safe way to get a sail down and also set a sail. I like when you get dialed in with a sock and you learn the angle to have your boat setting at on the autopilot and the right amount of sheet, and you go forward and you pull the sock up and the sail just sets. It's a pretty good feeling, and it takes a bit of getting used to, but I still encourage people to use socks, and it's the lower cost option when compared to furling.
Yeah, and we don't have a video of the furling, but they're a great addition to have a furling kite. I mean, we run them on the Corsairs, but it's just so much fun.
Yeah, top-down furling, is a relatively new innovation, and quite often you can take your G0 Screecher furler, unplug that sail out of it, and there's a top-down adapter that can be used to change it to a top-down system. And by having a torque cable flying through the air attached to the head of the sail and the top-down furler, you can turn an asymmetric spinnaker into a furling sail. The biggest thing to understand about both these systems is they're purely a system for setting or retrieving the sail. They're not a system for leaving the sail up at anchor, because there's just too much windage and so much shape in a light spinnaker cloth sail that it's not safe, and it can unfurl or get little tight knots. So they're great systems, but they are more complex to use than a bottom-up traditional furler on a Code 0 or G0.
Let's talk a little bit about sail trim. I mean, obviously, when you're cruising, you're not too concerned about it, but there are some key points that you know, you can get a little bit more efficiency out of your boat. Talk about, we've got an image here, I think, of another gunboat. You know, you're going to go straight to the top. We're talking about sail trim. You want to explain what's happening here? There's quite a belly and twist in the main there.
Yeah, so whilst we have travellers on nearly all of our multi-hulls, we don't have vangs because the cabin's generally in the way. And when we ease the sheet out, we tend to get a lot of twist in the main. And that's what you can see here. And that's what you want when you're running deep downwind. We were talking earlier about the tweaker or the handy billy system you could use on the spinnaker. You can do a similar thing to a boom as well to control the amount of twist. But, you know, all the mainsails from North Sail will come with a set of leech telltales up the back of the sail. And if I was on that boat right now, that is the main means of trimming the leech twist with the main amount of main sheet on the sail. So I don't have any good pictures, but a leech ribbon is a little piece of spinnaker cloth, like a telltale, that hangs off the leech. The critical ones are sort of 2/3 the way up the sail, up towards the head. And that is the best indicator of how your mainsail is set. And to keep it reasonably basic, if you have a leech telltale or leech ribbon that is permanently sucked behind the leech of the mainsail on the leeward side, then you need to ease more main sheet out and let the sail twist and breathe. If that leech telltale is flowing freely out the back constantly, then you can afford to sheet the mainsail on. And it doesn't matter what boat you've got, if you approach it in that way, you'll get the best set out of your mainsail.
So what's the key advantage, I guess, or more or less twist? Is it, like you said, just getting the sail to breathe as the apparent wind moves around?
Yeah, if you have less twist, you'll be presenting the sail incorrectly to the wind, and it will be stalled, and it won't have good airflow around the sail and thrust. So if you ease the sail too much and have too much twist, you'll actually see the apparent wind come around the front of the sail and backwind at the luff. So the correct twist and correct set is ultimately giving you the best thrust forward and covering the most miles, and also looking after the sailcloth in your sail.
And I guess we're talking about ultimately the center of effort, because the top of the sail is a completely different angle to the foot of the sail.
Yeah, and the wind does bend as you get higher off the water. But, you know, we only have so much traveller. If we ease too much main sheet, that boom will start to sky and the top will over twist. So on a multi-hull, we're nearly always going to have the boom. You know, the boom's going to be a lot further in than where the head is.
And what about the spinnaker? I was always taught to just have the luff of the spinnaker starting to curl a little bit. What advice have you got around trimming?
Yeah, so you're looking for the luff just starting to curl. That's how you also know you're getting the most out of your sail. But you want the luff to be curling roughly halfway down the luff. So you look halfway up the sail, and that's the first point it starts to curl. What happens quite often is as you bear away and you run deep, the sail may start to curl in the top third of the luff. So you're looking up quite high in the sail and you see it collapsing from up the top. And that can be an indication that you need a tweaker on that sail to run that lower angle. As soon as you tweak the sail, you'll see the curling in the luff move down and be more in the middle. So you're trying to balance it, you know, with your tweaker to get the most out of that sail.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation. On the breeze, when you're working to windward, obviously kite's down, jib's out, or genoa's out. What about trimming your main then? Should you be applying twist, or is it?
Yeah, the leech telltales I spoke about earlier work for almost any point of sail on the main. So you're going to be sailing upwind, and you don't want to stall your main out and crank your main sheet on too hard. The boat's going to feel dead. The sail's going to look fine, but you're going to see those leech telltales suck around the back of the main. It's going to be stalled out. At the same time, if you don't have enough main sheet on, the sail will over twist and look a little bit like this on the wind, and it'll backwind, and you won't be putting all the power through the boat. So you'll need to bring the main sheet on. So I general rule to windward on a race boat or a cruising boat is if you can have those leech telltales flowing freely 50% of the time, you're pretty close to the optimum set. And you're going to achieve that with traveller setting up close to windward and in the centre of the boat and main sheet pressure. Then you've got your headsail, and you want your headsail and your main to work together, and you want to have a nice slot between the two. So if you've got one of them choked or stalled or pulled on too hard, you're going to feel the boat go dull and slow down. And when you get them both working together, they both have a similar leech twist and a nice slot between the two, you're going to feel the boat accelerate forward. So
because the risk is you can essentially stall the mainsail from choking the wind flow from the jib.
Yeah, the problem with choking a mainsail is essentially everything looks fine. The wind's just coming at it from the wrong angle for the sail set. So the easiest thing to do on a multi-hull is crank the main sheet on too hard, stall the mainsail, everything looks right to the eye, and the boat doesn't go forward. So as soon as you look up and see those little leech telltales absolutely pinned behind the main, you know you have stalled out the airflow. It's no longer rushing around the back of the sail and thrusting the boat forward. As soon as you ease that main, you'll feel the power come into the boat and the airflow reattach and start accelerating forward. The boat starts accelerating forward. So it's just a simple little piece of fabric off the back of the sail, but it's the easiest way to visually pick what's happening up there. And I'd encourage people, as we do on race boats, to experiment. You know, look at your speedo, ease your main sheet out a little bit. We always say, if in doubt, ease it out, because it's really easy with a winch to pull it on too hard. If in doubt, ease it out, see if the boat lifts, if it accelerates, and you've probably had the main sheet on too hard. At the same time, if you think maybe you don't have enough on, if it needed to come on, you pull it on, you will feel the boat accelerate and the power come into the boat. So, you know, leech telltales are something that's come from racing, but they're still very useful for the cruising sailor to gauge easily where his sails trim's at.
Excellent. No, that's fantastic, Ben. So we're almost coming up to an hour now. So I'll just put up your details there, and I'd recommend there's a great article that Ben did, which I think is on your website, right? On the North Sails
Yeah,
website.
It'll be on the North Sails website. There's a lot of interesting information for cruisers on there. But yeah, I've recently done a webinar for North and an article on there about downwind sails and the range of options. So go and have a look, and it can be confusing for people. So, you know, contact us anytime. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. You can get in touch with me, and I can be of assistance and work with anyone locally.
Yeah. So we'll put some notes in the replay of the video on YouTube afterwards. But we'll go to a couple of questions here, Ben, before we wrap it up. So we've got another question here around, I guess, the self-ticking, the storm jib and a self-tacking jib that came up earlier. How is it possible to envelope a storm jib around a self-tacking jib?
Yes. Right. Yeah. So this self-tacking jib would need to be furled away, obviously, and the furling line locked. And then a storm jib could be made to have a luff that wraps around that furled sail and clips back onto itself and is hoisted. It's not our go-to recommended option, but it can be done.
Yeah. Okay. Got a question here from David. G'day, David. Glad to have you here, mate. What is the approximate life and versus cost for a 3DI versus 3DL?
Yeah, the 3DL was the previous North Sails technology. It was sort of globally known as the fastest sail out of a bag when it was new. It was quite light, but it was a sandwich of films and fibers, or taffetas and fibers in it. It actually had quite a short lifespan, especially in terms of cruising. So, the cost of 3DI is in line with where 3DL was, but the longevity is well more than double. Like, I guess if I went back to the examples I've seen since I've been with North Sails on the racetrack, everyone jumps on their big boats and goes to Hobart each year, and an offshore 3DL main used to be a 1 to 2 race sail, and the other sailing the boats sit in between. And when Alive won the Hobart a few years ago, that was their 4th Hobart with the 3DI mainsail. So it's very similar in racing terms. The Volvo ocean race boats are going around the world with very few sails. They're not having to replace 3DI hardly at all, where they used to have to replace 3DL massive amounts of new sails throughout the whole race around the world. So there's the biggest single change is a huge step forward in durability and lifespan. So and the cost is not really a big change from the 3DL product. The North has made a big step forward in durability, and then when we start to have more and more products coming out using that technology for cruises, you see that's where you see 3DI actually really works for the cruising market.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll have to have a chat to you about something on a Corsair 880 at some stage, maybe. Be a good boat to play around with it on.
Yeah, that'd be the perfect boat.
Yeah. I've had another question here, more in relation to Ultramare, actually, a question around inner stays and stay sails. So, and I'll just answer that one real quick. So the stay sail or storm jibs can be added to an Ultramare with a inner stay, which is an option, but you need to have the forward compression beam that's got the rigidity to handle it. So the standard configuration on some of those boats don't have that compression beam, but some of the certainly the bigger ones, the 5X are standard with it, the 4X are standard with it, but the 51's an option. So it's simply an optional extra, or you go to some of those other alternatives that we talked about. Ben, with furling a Genoa, maybe even more a self-tacking jib, I mean, can you get away with putting a few furls in a jib to act as a storm sail?
Normally, when you've got a self-tacking jib, it's not a great option to become a storm sail. It is by nature going to be a sail that is a little heavier than a Genoa. It needs to go through a bigger wind range. But we discourage the use of that sail as a storm sail. If you're in a situation and you have no storm jib, you're going to half furl that sail in and use it as storm jib, no problem. But you will do damage to the sail on its foot and its leach long term, and you'll see that next time you're in 10 knots. But if we were to look at it from a safety point of view, if the question was, can I use one as a storm jib? If you're in that situation, then that is what you would do. You would half furl it. You would use it like that. But you really need a sail engineered for that to come out the back of that situation with a usable sail still.
Because the storm jib is just a heavier.
It's much heavier. It is completely purpose built. Any other head sail or jib is being built to work through an incredibly wide wind range, and its sail shape is cut for that, and its engineering and the corners and everything is made for that. A storm jib is just completely engineered for storm situations. It's very heavy sail and very flat in shape. That's the other thing. There's a lot of aero drag, on a sail that is partly furled in head sail, and it's not ideal to present that to 40 to 50 knots of wind. A storm jib's quite flat cut and actually is going to feel a whole lot nicer dragging that through the air.
Yeah, I mean, we often do that with the jibs, furl them up, but it also puts an awful lot of load on the furling line, which have been known to chafe and explode at the worst possible time.
It's really pushing everything to a place you can't possibly design a standard jib or head sail to be a storm sail, or it will no longer be usable in the lighter range. So the best thing about a storm jib is it's completely built for that purpose. The reason I say get a rigger involved your boats may have standard upgrade options, but it's really good when you're playing in storm situations to have everything signed off. Know that your halyard's correct. Know that that the takeoff on the deck and the furling system and the sail is all going to be up to the job.
Mm. Oh, fantastic. All right, mate. Well, listen, we've just gone over the hour, so thanks very much for taking the time out to chat to us and share some insights with the technology that's coming down the pipeline. It's fantastic to see. So, but I'll ask now the borders are opening up. What's on the bucket list, mate? Where do you see yourself when everything's allowed to move?
You've got to head north, mate. You've got to head north. So I can't wait to get up around the Whit Sundays. I mean, I've got a bit of a racing program to do up there, but we always try to find at least a few days to get out in some of those bays and around the island and maybe, get the feet on Whitehaven Beach. So I can't wait to get north. That's it at the moment. Yeah.
Are you guys going up and doing Hamo and Airlie Beach?
I'm actually racing on a yacht at Hamo, and I'll probably be on a multi at Airlie Beach. But yeah, we'll definitely be up there. There's a lot of planning going on and a lot of excited people who can't wait to get north this winter.
Yeah. Well, listen, if we're allowed to get up there, hopefully I'll see you up there, mate. But for now, we're shackled down here in old Sydney town like convicts. But hope to see you up there. But
we'll
thanks again, mate.
We'll let you all up. Yeah. Okay, mate. Thank you.
Bye-bye.